Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Professor. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm very happy and honored to join this panel, and I'm very sorry that I couldn't travel to Istanbul and to be with all of you, but it will be for the next time for sure.
No problem, sir. Thank you as well to you to be with us here, and also thank you for being with us here, and thank you for your contribution to our session in advance. Sorry for late connection because we started late to our session. There, sir, you are an academic and legal counsel specializing in intellectual property, European Union affairs and law, media technology and cultural affairs, along with internet law. Currently, as a scholar, your works focus mostly on interaction between media law, culture and technology. Along with this academic title and your works, you are also chief prosecutor and coordinator of the Fair MusE project funded under the Horizon Europe program. In this respect, I want to have three questions to you. First of all, I would like to I want to ask you that question. How would you describe the Fair MusE project and what are their main goals and expected results? You have 3 to 4 minutes for this question. Thank you. You have the floor now.
Thanks for your question. First of all, I'm delighted to present the Fair MusE project to you, and thanks for your kind introduction. Fair MusE is an interdisciplinary effort by researchers, including lawyers like me. I'm the head of the law team, and specialists of other disciplines that I found as the person who initiated the project relevant for the comprehension of the digital music ecosystem. We have economists in our team, and we have data scientists as well. And we are working together with industry. That's how also I met representative of MÜYORBİR in Brussels, because we constantly talk to representatives of composers, publishers, performers, and record producers. Fair MusE is a project that aims at verifying how the music ecosystem changed because of the online environment, taking into consideration both streaming services that you are all familiar with and the social media environment. So Fair MusE has several tasks. We are currently finishing our project. We are in the final 5 months of the project. We already did quite a lot of work in the field of music copyright, in the field of algorithms used by streaming services and social media to organize the work that is uploaded by musicians and also by users. And at the same time, we studied very carefully the business models of the various online providers that we have. So from Spotify and Deezer to YouTube, TikTok, and Meta's platforms. And this was particularly useful for us because it helped us understand how the value of music changed and which ecosystems are capturing the value of music. What is probably obvious for you, for the members of the audience, for the members of the organization, and for cultural policymakers in Turkey as well, is the fact that the value of music has never decreased by itself. It's just been captured, just been taken by certain intermediaries that built the ecosystem itself. So Fair MusE is looking at streaming, of course, but even more so at social media, because social media, YouTube is probably the most successful one historically, but TikTok is also a very good competitor. Social media are, I would say, more spread out and even more democratic in their purpose to let music be accessed. So even though musicians look at Spotify more highly and more with more interest, and then they look at other platforms, we should never forget that professional music, professionally made music and recordings are everywhere online. So there is no reason to discriminate between streaming services and social media platforms. This is something that for MusE aimed at analyzing from the very beginning, looking in particular at one reform that was passed by the European Union in 2019, that was the accountability, the copyright accountability of social media platforms. The famous Article 17 of this directive from 2019, number 790, which is called, to make it easy to remember, Digital Single Market Directive. So copyright, music copyright in the digital single market. So we are doing this, and the idea is to better understand, just to summarize the purpose of the project, what the influence of algorithms on the exposure of repertoires is, why the business models of the various platforms change the paradigm for music right holders so much, and which one among these services is the most fair towards right holders, and last but not least, what is not working in the field of data, music metadata, so that at the end of the day there are quite many black boxes and difficulties in allocating revenues in a nuanced and very sophisticated way to all the music right holders. So there is a legal component that is based on the contracts between musicians and publishers and record producers. There is another part that concerns the liability of social media, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. There is another component that instead focuses on the business side and wants to better understand what is the relationship between the business model of every platform and the algorithms and playlists they use to maximize user engagement. The conclusion that we reached, but I mean, this is not the newest part of the project, is that the music ecosystem, the music market online is becoming an attention market, not necessarily a market for the wonderful records, the wonderful songs, the wonderful compositions that we listen to. So this has to be properly understood, even by organizations like MÜYORBİR and others, in order to better understand how they can adapt their licensing and their activities to this fast-changing reality.
Yes, thank you very much for this explanation to first question, sir. And the second question is, how has the European Union handled the transition from analog to digital music exploitation in its regulation of collective right management, and what kind of model has been built for online licenses, and what are the results?
Thanks a lot for your question. Well, FairMuse is funded by the European Union through a program called Horizon Europe. It's a European Commission that is funding us. So it's a government. The government of the European Union is actually giving us, it's a 3 million euro project employing nearly 30 people across 9 countries. Despite the origin of the funding, the European Commission leaves us with the freedom to criticize it, which is kind of important. And it's a privilege. The European Commission, at some point, it was more than 20 years ago, decided that in the music ecosystem, especially the collective rights management organizations, the collecting societies for both authors and publishers and performers, should have been reorganized in order to be more efficient. This is particularly evident for the composers and publishers side of the market, so the so-called publishing rights. For the performers' rights, the issue is different because the recording rights are normally administered either directly or through agencies, no, for the independent labels. But just to go to the source of the main reform and change that we had in the past 20 years, the European Union started putting pressure on the composers and publishers, collecting societies, for them to progressively become data companies, to organize their repertoires and their data in a way that would have been easier for them to respond to the licensing demands coming from the digital exploiters. At the beginning, it was Apple's iTunes, but then you all know that at some point between 2006, 2008, there was a slow but then irreversible transition from downloads to streams. So in this regard, the abilities of collecting societies to properly license billions of exploitations on streaming services and social media became a necessity. So in a way, we do have a directive in the European Union that MusE has studied from 2014. It's a directive that came at a time the market for licensing was already being restructured. But essentially, this directive, on one hand, gave every musician, every composer, the right to choose a collective rights management organization without having to resort to the society of the country where they live. So this is important because until that time, until 2005, 2006, there was this idea that if you lived in Italy, you had to have CI as a collecting society. If you lived in the UK, you had to have PRS and so forth. So there was a liberalization of the system. The directive ratified a change of perspective. So every musician, every composer is free to choose a society, and if not a society, there is also the possibility of choosing an independent management entity. So in a way, this directive also legalized the situation that in the market came out very clearly. So besides the traditional collecting societies, new agencies, new companies came out with the idea to compete with society on the administration of certain repertoire. So in a way, if I can summarize this, there has been an attempt, pretty bold, pretty decided by the European Commission to inject competition between collecting societies and new management entities. To respond to the final part of your question, the results are good in a way, because obviously this field has gone through a profound phase of restructuring, modernization. There has been a development, meaning that there are some joint ventures between publishers and collecting society that became excellent instruments for the music industry to license their repertoires to YouTube, Spotify, and the like. Yet, the dark side of it, the negative side, is that the system has become exceptionally fragmented, and the inequalities between repertoires and between right holders have been broadened, have been exacerbated. So at the moment you have some very specific and proprietary licensing hubs that belong, for instance, to joint ventures that the PRS, Gamma, Steam built. The most famous one is ICE, that is controlled by these entities. And so we have gone from universal licensing idea, model, so all the repertoire licensed in a single transaction, to the idea of licensing repertoires. And this caused issues because some repertoires are not represented fairly and independently as they used to be. So there has been a concentration of power that raises the risk of marginalization of certain repertoires.
Yes, sir. And how about the performers' rights? How does the landscape of performers' rights look in the European Union? And what are the main obstacles to performers' fair remuneration in digital markets? Yeah.
So I know that the treatment of performers' rights is particularly important for your gathering today, and obviously Fair MusE and also the people involved in the project started by me place a lot of attention to the question of how to protect performers. And the European Union has a long tradition in the domain of performance rights because it started harmonizing the rights of the member states from 1992 by starting to codify all the exclusive rights of performers, which are the traditional one that you're familiar with. But those rights are the rights that normally performers transfer to record labels whenever they produce a recording. So those are rights that are done also to give performers bargaining power whenever they sign a contract with a record producer. And on that front, for a number of reasons, there is no particular issue because these rights followed the harmonization of copyright, of authors' rights. So there has been a sort of parallelism that was also boosted and facilitated by the adoption of Directive 2001 number 29, the famous, for those who know EU law, Information Society Directive. From then onwards, performers have had the same rights as authors, especially if you think of some statutory licenses such as the private copying levies. In that regard, performers are very much aligned with the authors. What is problematic in the digital environment is the handling, the management of remuneration rights. Remuneration rights, as you know, because Turkey follows this model as well, are more or less well established in broadcasting, no? Radio and TV broadcasting. On the internet, for a number of reasons, the European Union doesn't have a single model. There are some countries of the European Union that transposed this directive from 2019 that I mentioned a few minutes ago. And the directive is quite important because it codifies the principle of fairness. That's why Fair MusE is named this way. Fairness means appropriate and proportionate remuneration. It's a goal, it's a principle that all member states are supposed to follow, but some of them, which include Belgium, Hungary, Spain already had it, Croatia, Poland, Portugal, decided that the idea of a remuneration right similar to that of broadcasting as a field should have been implemented even online. And they did so. The only problem for Belgium, for instance, is that there has been an appeal brought by the record producers, of course, and now the appeal has joined the Court of Justice of the European Union because there is a controversy about whether or not a remuneration right for streaming exploitations, for online exploitation for performers, is compatible with the directive from 2019. We are waiting for this judgment, but meanwhile, if I may, the main problem that performers' rights have is the lack of harmonization regarding statutory rights, remuneration rights, but also, and this is something that certainly you are familiar with in Turkey as well, the lack of proper data concerning especially the session musicians and the link between the codes of the records, the ISRCs, and the performers involved in every recording. Not very much the feature performers that are the stars. So we had a star at the beginning of this panel that I know as well, even though I'm Italian, and the non-star performers, because for the session musicians, the main problem is to be properly identified and to be properly credited, because without credit, without their mention in the records data, there is no way for them to be remunerated, unless we think of performers' rights as a sort of blind subsidy to the industry and to the sector itself. Obviously, this is something that we are still discussing in Europe. There is a big clash, big fight between stakeholders, and again, we believe at Fair MusE the most important thing to solve is the interconnection of data and the transparency of the reports being submitted by the online exploiters. We are fighting to a certain extent intellectually and politically on the question of not of the music industry, especially the medium and small size record producers and collecting societies not receiving proper reports from, especially from the social media industry. But I mean, the problem is broader. There are questions even about how Spotify and Deezer report their users. So this is something that is still very much debated in Europe.
Thank you very much, sir. You mentioned the interaction between European Union legislation, technology and licensing models performed by collecting societies. Thank you very much for your contribution. Do you have last words for your end contribution?
It was my pleasure. And again, next time I would love to come into Istanbul and meet you in person. And hopefully, when Fair MusE ends, we will end our project at the end of February 2026. We are planning some events in which we want to, offer, disseminate our results in a more specific way. We are also producing an e-learning initiative to the benefit of artists, performers. It will be available in the next few months in a way that we can explain even in a non-technical way how the European Union is trying to protect the rights of artists and musicians, especially now that AI, artificial intelligence, is posing an additional threat to the integrity and to the authenticity of music making. Thank you so much.
Thank you to you too, sir. It is our pleasure to have you with us here. See you soon again.
See you.